Hello, everyone. Hello, hello.
Hey.
Welcome to Courageous Custody, real stories, real solutions, your weekly dose of empowerment and practical guidance.
Yes. Hi, everybody. We understand the unique challenges protective parents face in the courtroom. And our mission is to equip you with the strategic thinking and emotional support you need to navigate that difficult journey with strength and resilience. So, if you're a protective parent facing seemingly impossible custody battle, you are not alone.
So every Thursday at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern, we're going to go live on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, bringing you real stories. You're going to hear stories about courageous parents who have walked in your shoes and emerged victorious in big ways and small. Their journeys will inspire you and offer invaluable insights. We're also going to give you expert advice, get practical strategies from us to help you advocate for your children and manage your trauma as you go through your custody case.
Yeah, so don't miss out on getting your own insights from our conversations. We would love for you to jump in with your own comments as we chat so we can hear from you too. And remember that courage is contagious, and together we can rewrite the narrative for protective parents.
Yes, so let's dive in.
Let's dive in,
I
Reneé.
am the creator of the Custody Blueprint, as many of you know.
And I am Achara Tarfa. I'm an IFS trained trauma recovery coach that assists with our custody blueprint clients.
So, just, we always like to start saying we're not giving legal advice and we're not giving therapy, although it can feel like it.
Yes, and if so you are feeling triggered, we want you to take care of yourself because this can feel very therapeutic, and we just want you to just take care of yourself and join us in the conversation when you feel good.
Yeah. So, today's topic is fighting allegations of postpartum depression, Munchausen by proxy, and other mental instability. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. So, we're continuing on that theme all this month of May. But if you're watching us on replay and it's not May, boy, do you know that these allegations happen all of the time. We talked at the beginning of May, a couple weeks ago, about combating mental instability allegations in family court and what that looks like. And that was a great session, great
Mhm.
response from people. But today, I think the focus is really on these out of the ordinary accusations. The PPD, the Munchausen by proxy, and these are particularly demonizing of women, right? It's like absolutely focused on women. PPD is about women. Munchausen, when you look it up, and to the definition, almost every definition you look up will say, this is the condition, this is what it is, and it happens to particularly mothers, right? But I want to, before we start talking about, how to combat it, I want to just kind of define this a little more so that we can put it in realities definition of it rather than the way that the family court has really warped what these things are, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, we've had our clients and these, listen, we get these all the time, like postpartum depression has to be the most frequent, like rare condition allegation that we get, right? We hear this all the time. So I want to do a level set here. 10% of women experience it. I mean, you go to family court, you would think 100%, right? But 10% of women will experience it. Here's what's interesting. So will 10% of men.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's not mentioned. That's not talked about. That's not
mentioned.
weaponized, right?
That's right. And it gets even more interesting. 50% of men whose partner does actually experience PPD will experience depression themselves. So you're right. That's not how the accusations work. And this is something that isn't talked about that I think, let's step outside the PPD thing for a moment. There is postpartum blues, right? And that's going to affect about 50 to 75% of moms. And then it goes away about a week later. So I bet every mom who's listening to this kind of like, okay, yeah, yes, I did not know what to do after I had, my first baby, my special needs baby, my first son, my first whatever, right? Every child is your first something.
Yeah.
And so postpartum blues, 50 to 75% of moms goes away a week later, right?
And this doesn't take into account when we talk about family court, right? And going through a custody battle that many of our protective parents go through. When it comes to our protective moms, these postpartum blues, the postpartum depression, all of these things that are sort of after effects of an event of giving birth to their child, right? Like what their body goes through,
Right.
right? The hormonal changes,
Yeah.
the psychological effect it has. Because if you have someone that's and not even to mention, people of color and marginalized, and statistics with them giving birth in situations, it's even more impactful
Yep.
when it comes to levels of safety. And all of these factors contribute to postpartum blues, right? That eventually go away, or postpartum depression, which is, again, like you said, 10% of women experience it. But having something like that weaponized against them in family court is just so heartbreaking. And I love how we help women navigate these, situations strategically in the courtroom and for themselves
Yeah.
as healing.
Yeah, well, it really partners well with, and I know, we've had some moms who have been accused of all of the above, right?
Oh, for
We have
sure.
quite a few right now that we're working with who are accused of all of the above, but the Munchausen by proxy, which does have another name, I don't know how successful it is. I don't know how well it's taking, but factitious disorder imposed on another. FDIA is sort of the new name for it. We'll see, how quickly it catches. But that, just to define it, is when, you are either, is when you're causing an illness, when a caregiver of any kind is causing an illness for their charge, their dependent, right? In this case, in terms of custody, the argument is that a mom is causing a disorder for their child. But in reality, that's not right, because the accusation is usually that a mother is exaggerating, which is sort of part of the definition of Munchausen, but it's creating all these problems where they don't exist. Munchausen, they do exist because the perpetrator is actually causing that child to be sick, right? I mean, there's these made for Hulu films, right, where it's like, there's this horrible parent, again, usually the mother, who is giving a certain combination of pharmaceuticals that will cause symptoms leading to something else entirely, right? But they're undetectable for some reason or whatever, right? And these children are in a terrible state. Those images that we see on these Hulu films, for example, are the images that the abuser paints of the mom, that this is where we're headed. We're headed toward a Hulu film,
Yeah.
because a mother is taking her child to the doctor when her child is sick or seems to be sick. So if you have a child that is particularly sickly, and you're taking them, then it very, very quickly turns into Munchausen accusations. And Achara, what is one reason that a child might end up going to the doctor more than usual?
Oh, let's see. Neglect.
Neglect. Yeah. And the other thing too is, what about those stomach aches and those headaches that they get?
Yeah.
It's that anxiety, right?
It's all of that anxiety. It's you were talking about the mom taking their kid to the hospital because they're sick, and which every mom should do, right?
Right.
This is something that's a normal thing to do, that's often weaponized against our protective moms. And our kids, when they're impacted by, let's just say, something like being gaslit, because anyone who has been in a situation where we have coercive control, that doesn't stop post separation, right? The kid is then used in an effort to coercive control the protective parent. And so what does that mean for the child? That means that the child is often neglected, or the child is gaslit themselves. There's narcissistic injury, meaning the child then, can't. I remember a situation just even recently, I'll explain it this way, where it was over strawberries, right? Like the child commented like, oh, the strawberries, mom taught me that organic strawberries are actually much smaller than these large ones. So that's an indicator of, maybe pesticides. And then the parent took that as, oh, my strawberries aren't good enough for you.
Yeah.
And all the child was sharing was just information that they learned that they would normally learn in health school or
Right.
anything. I'm just talking about strawberries. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying mom's strawberries are better than yours or anything like that. And so that even just little simple conversations can cause so much anxiety and that feeling for a child of, I'm getting in trouble. I'm going to be in trouble. And so what do? They shut down and they store all of that inside, and they don't have their protective parent to go to for safety. And oh my goodness, can't talk about it at school or with my friends, or so they just bottle it all inside. And then, yeah, that can turn into stomach aches. That can turn into a racing heart. That can turn into panic attacks.
It can turn into vomiting. It can turn into regression with, defecating themselves and that type of thing. And then what ends up happening is that these parents are trying to figure out what is going on. Is this, an allergy? If there's a very real allergy, right? Those things are very, very hard to figure out sometimes. What is the allergy? And then many times what we're talking about is the allergy, right? The trauma from the abusive parent, from the coercively controlling parent. And so, the good mother is trying to take them to see, oh, well, they can't figure out what it is, but they suggest these two specialists. It's my job as the mother to follow up and to take our child to see those two specialists. But while we're racking up all of these doctors and these specialists to try to figure out how to make their child feel better, that becomes evidence against the mother,
The
right?
mom.
Look at all this doctoring. This is clearly Munchausen, right?
Yes.
Now, and I want to be very clear.
Okay.
Munchausen is actually extremely, extremely rare. Again,
Very
another thing you wouldn't think it from, it's far more rare than PPD, but you get into family court and it's according to the family court. I mean, the statistics are about as high as PPD, you would think, the real statistics for PPD. And so it's ridiculous. Now, you talk about gaslighting. And I think that what we want to focus on today are, the two pieces about these very rare illnesses that are attributed to moms when you're in a custody battle against an abuser. I think the two things to focus on is that feeling for the mom of gaslighting, as well as, what do we do about it? And with that feeling of gaslighting, how often do we hear these moms say, well, I kind of am taking them to a lot of doctors. And suddenly it's like Munchausen is so ridiculously rare. And yet we have these mothers investigating themselves. Do I have PPD? Do I have Munchausen? Do I have these other rare disorders that they're finding and coming up with?
That's because they are good moms. And so they're taking the time to sort of self-examine and self-evaluate and
Yeah.
go, maybe is that possible? And they're being curious about themselves. And even that begins to turn into spiraling of self-doubt. And we have to remember, I also want to point out that, these protective moms have been subjected to the abuse, verbal, psychological, emotional, financial abuse by these, parents who aren't protective. And when that happens, there's often an inner critic that gets co-opted, right? That part of them just starts to sort of go, yep, that is you. And it's not the voice of themselves, right? It's all part of that self-abandonment that they've had to do and endure in order to survive where they were. And so starting to ask themselves those questions and get curious about that isn't necessarily because they have, right? Or that's true, but it's often the voice of the abuser that's in their head that they've then been co-opted to sort of go, oh yeah, and then maybe I can do better here. And that's all because they are actually a really good mom asking themselves these questions. The key is to not take that as truth and spiral into it because it's so rare.
That's right. So rare. Yeah. And, Munchausen is just extremely rare. And look, if you want to know what Munchausen by proxy, which is extreme and is rare, looks like, then yeah, go to Hulu. That's not you. A PPD is a little fuzzier. And that's why I brought up the postpartum blues. You know, I can't tell you how many moms, you know, that I've talked to have said, well, I think I did have postpartum depression, even though it was never diagnosed. Yeah, it was never diagnosed because maybe it was actually just postpartum blues. And these moms are indeed saying I think I felt it for like maybe a week, maybe two. Yeah, postpartum blues is about that long. 50 to 75% of women experience that. So I think part of that gaslighting is that we're willing to like take a few puzzle pieces and turn it into their puzzle, their picture.
That's
And it's
right.
actually a different picture.
Yeah, that's right. And often that's not the case, right? And really just sort of, a lot of the work that I do with our moms is really helping them to sort of come back into a self-alignment of what is true,
Mm,
what is not true, who they are, what is true about them, and really holding on to that, because it's really hard to find yourself again after this. And especially when you're going through all of it at the same time, to sort of center in and go, you know what? That is actually not true about me. I wouldn't be a mom who overly takes her kid to the doctor for no reason. There is a reason here, and to
yeah.
trust that gut instinct of there is a reason. The other thing I want to mention is, it's so rare that sleep isn't talked about enough, right? How
Mhm.
I don't know how many times I remember my kid was sick, 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 and not once did anyone say, "Well, how's sleep been?" And forget the fact that, even though the other parent could have shown up to the doctor's appointments, chose not to. And
Yeah.
so the questions couldn't be asked to that parent. So what is sleep like? Because we know that when our bodies sleep, that resets our bodies into a homeostasis, where our bodies can sort of then get that blood flowing. Our hippocampus is sort of organizing memories and all of these things that happen to our bodies when we sleep. If our child is not getting enough sleep, then absolutely, when they wake up the next day from the short amount of sleep that they've gotten, their body is going to start showing signs and symptoms of neglect. Their body is going to start showing all of these signs. And
Yeah.
so we have to really, when we're sort of coming at it from a holistic perspective, mention those types of things and go, oh, hold on, wait a minute. My kid's not sleeping. My kid has reported to me that they've been getting 2 hours of sleep or waking up throughout the night because of nightmares. How many of our protective moms report that when their child comes back from being at the abusive home, that their kid had nightmares every night they were
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. So much. So much. So what do we do about these things? Right. So there's a number of very tactical things to do that are good. They're very good in terms of combating this, but you really want to put these things together, and you want to put them together in the right way. The first thing is you want to keep track of all of these medical documents, right? You want to get a hold of all these medical documents. You want to these days, most or at least many of these clinicians have these portals where they put down their notes. I think when clinicians were first doing that, they really kind of included more, as some of them are getting a little more sparse. But I like indicating to them, being all like, will all of this be in the clinician's notes? Because I want to make sure I got it all, as a way of prompting that clinician to understand that they're not going to get away with, we discussed this, here's my name, Dr. Smith, right? That it's got to be sort of like, what I talked about was this, and try to get as much as you can. I'm a big fan of, because we're all in doubt every time our kid has a fever. We're all like, is this an urgent care situation, or is this a Tylenol and stay at home,
Mhm.
situation? We're reaching 103, so it seems like it's the doctor. I'm a big fan of calling the nurse's line first and documenting that. Um, because that's a way of, you didn't take them to the doctor, you just checked in to see if you should. So then you've got that other person saying, take them into the doctor. Well, that's not Munchausen if somebody's telling you to take them in.
That's right.
Right. And then, record all of these doctors' appointments, all of these conversations with nurses, whether over the phone or not, as long as it's legal in your state or province. Right. So you got to have proof of what these conversations were like. And
Can I
also,
ask you real quick there? So what does a mom do if it is legal and she sort of brings this videotape. Is it okay if I videotape us? And the doctor sort of goes,
You can't.
okay,
Well,
yeah.
videotaping is almost never legal.
Oh,
It's
I'm sorry.
never legal.
Audio
So
record.
audio,
So
yeah. Thank you for
so
that
would
clarification.
you say to name that, like to say, I'm audio recording, or not name it? Because this is what happens. A mom will do that, and then she's concerned about how she looks to this third party, and that can come
Yeah.
off weird and
Uh-huh.
awkward and hypervigilant. So what do you say about that?
So look, if you want to look up whether or not you start out with finding out if it's legal in your state or province or district. And the way that you do that is by putting in the name of your state, for example, recording laws, California. And then it's going to tell you that it's either a one party consent state or a two party consent or all party consent state. You need
Great.
one party consent state. As long as it's a one party consent state and you are part of the conversation, right? Then you, Achara, would be able to record because you're part of that appointment. You're part of the conversation. You're asking questions. You're talking about your child, right?
Mhm.
So you can record without ever telling anybody you're going to record. And, and we at some point need to spend some time on recordings because there's a lot about recordings that people think, well, I can't use all this in court. No, you're not going to use hardly any of it in court. But a lot of it will be what we're talking about here is if there are allegations, you need proof against it. And
Absolutely.
sometimes that's where we find the recordings to be more effective. People think they're getting recordings to gather evidence against their co-parent, but we're finding it more effective to gather evidence against their allegations. And so that's why it's like, if you're in a parent-teacher conference, if you're in any of these medical appointments, you got to be recording this thing, right?
Audio recording.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's something that you have to consider it. Is it legal? And then you have to think about HIPAA. HIPAA is tricky, right? But if you're being accused of something where your children are being taken away, then I think you can have the recordings and ask your lawyer. You should always go to your lawyer with recordings and say,
Sure.
okay, here's what I've got. Is this okay? Is it not? And I always like to recommend Otter, OTTER, like the animal. I always like to recommend that people download Otter. It's free. And then what you can do is Otter is really about note taking because it transcribes the first 20, maybe 30 minutes free for you. And so when you go in, it's really an opportunity for you to have what happened at that appointment. Because how often have you gone into an appointment, right? Achara, and you're all kind of like, okay, I think I remember everything, but oh
Right.
shoot, what was it that they said about, how often to apply the ice pack again? It's like we're not going to remember everything. And so having something like that, especially when you've got your child, maybe your ex is there in the room with you or on the phone or on Zoom,
Correct.
on FaceTime, there's a lot that's your brain is going to get blocked in some ways. Having
Oh,
Otter take those notes for you or whatever, a voice memo, whatever, is a great idea. And you can say, this was for me, the clinician's notes don't have everything. And as a matter of fact, I have proof thanks to the recording. And so that extra stuff that wasn't captured in the clinician's notes was very useful to me. So there you go. Right.
I think it's so important because you're in a state, right, where your kid is hurt or something's going on that you don't fully understand. And nobody around you seems to fully understand, or you do understand, but nobody's listening. And you're in a sympathetic survival response state.
Yeah.
And so that prefrontal cortex and the ability to reason and think through things and be present fully is not going to be to manage both, to take notes and sort of be present and sort of support your child. You're
A lot of
giving
it.
all your energy to your kid at that point.
Right.
So it's so helpful to have an assisted tool that's going to record what's going on. And then you can later on, after you've sort of got some space to be by yourself, go through that and re-listen to that in, because there's going to be things that you've missed and that will be key for your case.
But let's talk about when it is a two-party or all-party consent state. That means that everybody in the conversation needs to, whether it says two-party or all-party, it means all-party.
Yeah.
That means that everyone who is in that conversation who is of legal age needs to consent to that. In that case, it's a little tricky because I agree with you. What we find is that, and of course, it's natural that it's hard to say, hey, doctor, do you mind if I record this? Because everyone, especially in the American states, it's kind of like it's such a litigious area that it's like doctors don't want to be recorded.
No.
Right? And
Yeah.
so they're going to say no, and then they might bring up HIPAA, which is a very fair thing to bring up, to be honest with you. So that's why I'm saying if you do it in the spirit of note-taking and realizing that your ex has all of these accusations against you, then it's important. But I want to say this. You may not know I mean, how often have we had moms, Audra, who are basically like, well, but my ex would never do that. And then 4.5 months later, what do you think is happening? And so it's like, we kind of feel like just preempt any possible. And if indeed these accusations never come your way, great. But if they do, you're covered, right? As covered as you can be.
Right.
And just real quick, let me go through a few more things.
Sure.
I think it's important to go dig up. This takes so much time, but to go dig up of while you were married, while you were together, proof of emails, text messages, any kind of messages at all. There's a million different things now between Facebook and WhatsApp, etc., where you invited or reminded your ex about all of these doctor's appointments that you were going to, or that your ex was going to, and you have proof that he either approved it. I don't mean like approval, gave approval. I mean that he was just kind of like, okay, great. Or that he let it happen without questioning you or saying, gosh, aren't you taking our child to the doctor too much? Aren't you going to the doctor an awful lot after our child was born? Shouldn't you be focusing on, if they're not questioning it then, how come in the middle of a custody battle, they're questioning it now? Right. I mean, that goes
Great
both
point.
ways, but that's going to be the argument that I think that you need to use.
Yes. That's a great point.
And
Absolutely. I
then,
just mentioned that earlier. Yeah.
speaking of mental health and that type of thing, get the child therapist before you leave if you can. And if you're unable to, then it becomes that, both parents have to consent. It's much easier during the marriage. Lean into your kiddo's mental health in a roundabout way. A school counselor, if they need an OT, find an OT that happens to have a therapeutic background as well. Just find ways, really investigate people who you can put in your little one's path that will offer that therapeutic support and possibly even speak to, that these allegations are false. This child is healthy. This child doesn't, there is no Munchausen going on. The mother is taking care of the child, whatever it might be. And then the last thing I'll say is you got to have witnesses for all of these things in as many
For
ways as you
sure.
can. Right. Take people with you to appointments. If your ex isn't going, a friend or a family member, unfortunately, seems the more obvious, but their words mean nothing in court. So I really like a babysitter or a nanny, pay for them, pay for their time, their hourly wage to be at those appointments with you. Right. Okay.
Great.
Well, we had a very robust conversation today, I think. Yes.
I think we did. Lots of information. But just go back if you're watching us right now and we've said some things and it's really hitting you as far as this is what I need right now. Check out our other videos too, because there will be wonderful information in all the other ones as well. And we really appreciate you joining us today. So thanks so
Yeah.
much.
So that's it for this week's
That's
episode
it.
of Police Custody. Before we go, thank you so much for joining us, whether live or on replay. We're so grateful to have helped in any way we may have. We have some great takeaways for this week. Don't let their accusation gaslight you into believing that about yourself.
Absolutely not. Mm-mm.
Gather medical documents to disprove their allegations and get your witnesses ready to go to participate. Next week, join us at 7 p.m. Eastern here. Like or follow or bookmark us so you can get the notifications and not miss a thing, because what we're talking about might catch you just when you need it. Don't forget to check the comments to get a free copy of the court appearance prep list. And you can go to thecustodyblueprint.com to learn about the different ways to get help in your custody case.
And, leave your own comments about your experience with this topic and any topics you'd like to see us discuss in the future. Wherever you're listening, remember that you're not alone. We want you to know that we're here to support you. If you want to reach out to me, I'm at acharatarfa.com. I'd love to set up a compassion chat with you just to sort of help you refocus on who you are. Until next week, stay strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for what matters most.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.